Welcome to the Future of Sharing, this series where we're trying to figure out how do we make the sharing economy work for everyone. I'm Pete Lyden, I'm the founder of Reinvent, the media company that's driving the project, and we're doing this in partnership with Airbnb. And today we have a deep dive interview conversation with Neal Gorenflo, who's the co-founder, executive director of Shareable, which you could think of it as a solutions journalism outlet that really focuses on sharing in the broadest sense. He's also, you could call him the co-editor of a new book called Sharing Cities, Activating the Urban Commons. It's just hot off the presses. We just got it here. And so we're going to be talking about the history of the whole really sharing world or sharing economy as we kind of think of it through this prism, including the latest iteration here in this book. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
It's good to have you here.
Glad to be here.
So you are one of the things that we've been interviewing all kinds of different people and different angles on sharing. And what's interesting about you is you've really had deep roots in this space, and you're still extremely active now. So one of the things I just thought would be useful to orient folks is to tell a little bit of your story.
Okay.
Because you kind of came out of a corporate job, I guess, and just saw the emergence of the very early days of this and started to plunge in. So just tell the story of kind of how you got involved in this whole thing.
Yeah, so it started on a sunny Saturday afternoon in Brussels. I was on a business trip, and staying over the weekend, I went on a jog in this business park outside of near the Brussels airport, right? And this was my normal jog because I was kind of commuting between here and there, and I had been doing that for months. I got to the top of the hill of my route, and I stopped, and something really unexpected happened. I began to cry, and my life flashed in front of my eyes, and I knew I needed to make a change. Where I was going in the corporate world isn't where I wanted to go, but there was a deeper impulse also. As I sort of recounted all of my struggles, there was a thread that connected everything, which was that I had been kind of doing life as a solo adventure, and it really just wasn't working on any level. Well, at least on paper, you could say I was somewhat of a success, in a very superficial level, but I didn't feel like I had become a person even. I felt alone and disempowered, and also ashamed that I didn't feel like I belonged or hadn't become something or become myself. And I really just fell to my knees and bawled my eyes out of that revelation. And what even added to it was I realized that I was far from alone, that this was perhaps the condition of many, if not most people on the globe today, the kind of disempowered, lonely, not connected, not valued in the way that they want to be. It was kind of a crushing realization. And I kind of made a vow at that point to do whatever I could to create a life and world where it was easy to find love and community and meaningful work, great conversations, everyday community, try to become a real person, a human being, I got up, I brushed off my knees, I ran back to my hotel room, I sent in my letter of resignation, I rebooked my flight home, to catch the first one back, and I just dove in from there. That this was in.
What year was that?
That was June 2004. Yeah.
And so from that point, how did you engage in what emerged into this sharing world?
Yeah. So I even before this moment, there's kind of a lot of build up and reading and experiences. I even knew at that moment that sharing would be key to this, and as a kind of practice, interpersonal practice, but also a kind of paradigm, economic paradigm. And so I went to find the others, and one of the first things I did is I started a little salon in San Francisco called the Abundance League, and it attracted people who loved sharing projects and projects that were for the common good, and built a little community around that. And did that for 5 years, and that was truly those kind of relationships which were based on purpose and really helping one another at in some cases very deep level. That changed me in the best possible way as a person. I felt for the first time that I belonged to something, that I had a mission, that I felt, I felt that people valued me for who I was, and what I stood for and what I wanted to give to the world, right? So I started to feel like I was becoming a person, and that was just supremely gratifying. And not only that, like with this community, it was based on abundance. And so, when you help 250 people get what they really want in the world, not what they're dying to do, help them with that, with their mission, with their purpose, they'll do a lot for you. I mean, you make the best of friends that way, and I'm still friends with a lot of those people, and I love them. But what I learned is, wow, this is a different way to make life happen and to get the things that you need, in a transformational way, not a transactional way, right? And life became easier. It was like as if, instead of like elbowing my way through the world and climbing the corporate ladder, it was more like my friends were networking me, moving me around a chessboard that they were creating for me and helping the future come to me and the things that I need to, to live out my purpose, right? And that was just, mind blowing, and also, I mean, it was deeply meaningful and satisfying. And
so the element of sharing, and you talk about this abundance league. I mean, there's a lot of ways in San Francisco people talk about abundance, kind of the whole economy and the future of more abundance. What was draw out the sharing element of what you're finding there, and how that, or how that led, I guess, to a more clearly articulated sense of sharing as one of the missions you're on.
Well, the sharing part was this. It was a monthly salon, so we met once a month. We did this for 5 years, and there was a lot of regulars who came and new people also coming in and out. And the structure was important. It was a gift circle plus a speaker, and the gift circle was the kind of magic sauce, the secret sauce. Everyone would take 1 minute. It was usually a meeting of 25, 30 people. It's a pretty small gathering, really. And everyone takes a minute to say what their purpose or project is, what their needs are, and what they can offer others. And then when 25, 30 people do that, everyone sees something they can contribute or get, right? And it's offered up freely to one another, right? This is this event was an invitation for people to bring their best selves, their most generous selves, and practice a new reality, right? And people just lived into it. They bought it and tried it, and at least for me, it really worked. And over time, you build these incredibly strong networks and people who are so committed to each other because they're connected based on purpose and deep, get to know each other at a deep level. And there's a lot of trust and motivation to help one another because you're all going in the same direction. You want to, do something that's good for everyone, right? And so that was the secret sauce. That what led to kind of transformation for me and other, especially the core group. And then it brought in opportunities, including I met a group, a family foundation in Florida that wanted to do something around sharing, and my friends connected me from this network, and we started talking about starting a movement for sharing. And they wanted a kind of plan, and I helped them write a plan. They loved the plan, and then they hired me to execute and launch a nonprofit, Shareable, to write about and catalyze a sharing movement.
And so what year is this? Kind of situate that in time?
So that was we launched in 2000, October 2009. And so we started working on the project, the year before.
So a lot of people do talk about the sharing economy as beginning kind of with the financial crash and kind of the economic pressures of that time, as well as the technological base of dispersed, smartphones and kind of high bandwidth connections. So that you fit perfectly in that. Do you see that as, were you seeing it as the beginning of something very different, kind of taking sharing to a 21st century kind of way or something, or how did you think about that?
Well, so it was interesting because when we started working on the project, to create Shareable, the sort of organizing question was, how do we create a movement for sharing, right? So it's 2008. And then, you know, I'm a researcher. I'm just a really super curious person, you know, and I learned by reading and talking to people and, you know, doing life experiments like the Abundance League, you know. And so I did my homework, and I was like, wow, we don't need to start anything. There is already a sharing trend that's not recognized as a movement, that no one has connected the dots and put a narrative around it, right? So that's where we decided to start, is to do that, right? And you know, this just had a catalyzing effect. Like, you know, people would come on the site and they go, and would think, you know, that it had been around for a long time, you know, and it was filling a kind of hole. No one was talking about sharing, you know, and part of the idea, part of like what influenced me and others, you know, heading in this direction was there was this whole sort of like sustainability boom and on the early aughts, and you know, but the human element was missing, and sharing was not even talked about, when for me and others it looked obvious that could be a great way to save resources, and not only that, bringing the human element into it, you know, particularly different social relations, like more beneficial, constructive, transformative social relations. That's the bit that really interested me and my friends at this time.
Okay, so you're just, let's just be clear, because you're really distinguishing two things here, which is interesting. So there was a sustainability trend from the beginning that you just, hey, if we use the same asset, share it amongst us, that's just good for the planet, better for resources and all that.
Yeah.
So that was one element. But the second thing, which was really important to you, in fact more important to you, was the human element.
Exactly.
So say more about that, the connection, the belonging, by sharing itself, you're connecting people regardless of, you know, making the best of an asset or something?
Yeah, I mean, the basic idea is there's many ways to provision our lives, right? And our argument, and which we really highlight in the book, are cases in which the users or the people in the community who where there's a need, that they are instrumental in working together to meet that need, and through that process, they are transformed. That there is a human and social development. So they develop as human beings that are, you know, capable of working well together, of communicating well, who have patience and a kind of civic attitude. They can see the long term and stick with things. These are kind of things you learn when you work in a group over a long period of time on delivering meeting a fundamental need in your community, right? And then there's a kind of social development also. So through those networks and all of that activity of creating together, you know, you create a sort of higher level of social cohesion, social capital, and this is what makes a community really resilient. And the research on this is, you know, there's scads of it that shows that a well-connected community with lots of social capital can go after opportunities and rebound from setbacks much faster and more effectively.
So I love that piece of the belonging piece, of the human connection piece, because I think that is an underappreciated piece here that we've been trying to draw out in this series. So I know we're going kind of meticulously here, but you're kind of giving it a nice history here. And I just wanted to say, even though that period, you said there was a lot going on in sharing.
Yeah.
The movement was really happening, but it wasn't conscious of itself. And so a site like yours was able to catalyze it, surprisingly. And people were saying, well, why hadn't this happened before? Could you just give a little bit of sense of what you said? Is sharing, are you talking about sharing's been with us from the beginning of time, or are you saying there was something different in this early 21st century that was happening around sharing?
Yeah, I mean, sharing is age old, and you could even say that we're sort of the sharing like alpha species on the earth, and this is how we. What makes us different is you know, we can collaborate and share flexibly at scale, right? This is our distinguishing characteristic and what has made us as successful as a species as we are, you know, so far. And and sharing and alternative economy, it goes in waves, kind of opposite economic booms, right?
Meaning when it's booming, less sharing. When it's tougher times, more sharing.
Yeah. When people are
literally tracking that over time, you've seen that.
Yeah, I've seen that, right. And co-ops are like 150 years old. You know, there's a long history even in the United States with mutual associations and all this mutual insurance and so forth. And so what I saw in 2008 was that this was reemerging, and there were new manifestations also. Things like Creative Commons, things like open source software, and all the open X movements, open hardware and open government, and et cetera, et cetera. And so the open was a kind of like sharing paradigm that was being copied and replicated in many different sectors of society. And then you had a resurgence of the solidarity economy, which co-ops are a key piece. And then you also had internet startups here in San Francisco, and some of them were just getting started, and they didn't have a lot of money, and there was a kind of strong communitarian ethos. And a lot of them, the founders, did come from like an environmental background, or that was their motivation, and they saw this as they saw sharing as a way to meet that mission also. So there was. And you saw this happening in many different sectors of society, and also in government and civil society and business. So we wanted to connect the dots and show like this underappreciated sort of trend and way that we can meet our needs together.
I love it. How do you think of the term sharing economy? And do you see that as, I'm just curious how you place that in this larger thing, because you're talking about open source and sharing music and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
How do you think of that, or what's that term do to you, or is it positive, negative, or what do you?
Well, the meaning changed over time.
Okay.
So in the early days, it had those sort of social and environmental connotations, or kind of front and center. So these are it's the typical diffusion curve where you got these early adopters and they're true believers and so forth, so, values driven. And I watched the whole media cycle from the beginning, and helped the media cycle get started actually, and because we were like the go-to source in San Francisco. So if another media outlet wanted to cover it, they would call us, and we would often go with them or connect them to the people in the space. So at first it was like a story about what I described, a more diverse palette, right? And then the story was just the business piece and the technology piece, right? And then it progressed even further, and it wasn't even that diverse in terms of the businesses. It was just like 3 or 4, Uber, Airbnb, Lyft, and that became synonymous with the sharing economy. And part of the reason that it got so much attention there is because Uber and Airbnb, there was a lot of controversy.
And so how do you? And again, we're just open to thinking about this in all these different ways you can think about it. So that seemed like an unfortunate development from your point of view.
Definitely a big downside, because a kind of meme and idea and paradigm that we promoted, it went sideways, right? And
sideways. What do you mean by sideways? Meaning?
After you can only control like a message for so long as it becomes public, right? And so the media gets a hold of it, and they do what they have a bias, right? They want to. And the bias was clearly, and I would talk. I did, I don't know, maybe thousands of interviews, right? And I would talk about our vision, and they really only wanted to talk about a piece of it. And this happened over and over and over again, right? And
you're talking about the mainstream media and people.
Mainstream media. Yeah, exactly. And
did you try to push back on that and try to broaden it?
But of course, but you can only do so much, right? But it also presented opportunities, right? Because for action is reaction, the dialectic and so forth. So it goes this way, and then it produces conditions which have energy for the opposite, right? And so we started talking about sharing cities and platform cooperatives. So we did stories. We did a similar thing, right, where we saw a trend and we connected the dots, and we launched coverage on it, and created a kind of alternative version of the sharing economy that was more about the social transformation that's possible and about spreading wealth. And as an example, sharing cities, in 2011, we already saw where things were going with the media and with the idea and the paradigm.
In what years are you talking about? Kind of shortly after the 2008, 2009? 2011. 2011,
right.
okay.
Yeah. And so we did this event called Share San Francisco, and brought leaders in business, civil society, and government together around a question: how do we make San Francisco, amplify San Francisco as a platform for sharing, right? And the city government really liked that. The mayor invited us to do a roundtable, really educate him and his staff. They launched the Sharing Economy Working Group. This was in 2012, early 2012. We helped organize the launch event, which was at Spur, which is the urban policy think tank here in town. It's been around for over 100 years. They have this beautiful big space, and this was up to that time, the most attended event in their history. It was packed. There's press everywhere. And I keynoted with Mayor Lee and a bunch of other folks. And this catalyzed the Sharing Cities meme. This put it out there on the map. And not too long after that, Seoul, South Korea, Mayor Park, a new mayor, a civil rights lawyer, and a social entrepreneur, and really a sharing guy. He started Sharing City Seoul. So this very ambitious, well-organized, well-funded, well-staffed policy and program to mainstream sharing in Seoul. Then once Seoul did that, then other cities started to do it. London, Milan, Amsterdam has been big, and then we have a kind of counter movement. And Mayor Park, being a social entrepreneur and human rights lawyer, he's expressing our sort of vision and ethos through his program. So it's there's a technological component, but it's very local and culturally appropriate. It's been shaped, as a local phenomenon, not a global one or an American one or a Silicon Valley one, right? And that's what's really encouraging. And just last year he won the Gutenberg Sustainability Prize. So. And for his Sharing Cities.
For that?
For that, yeah.
Just last year,
2016, yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. So when you say unpack Sharing Cities, because when you use that, you can kind of begin to think about that, but what does it mean for you? And
right.
What is that?
Well, from our experience with what happened with the sharing economy, how it got, sort of hijacked or commercialized, it made me really think, like, we're going to do this again, like, we better do it right, and we better think about this. So we needed our own political economy, right, as a foundation. So we adopted, and this had already been in our toolkit from the start, but we started to put the commons, as a focal point and a foundation for the kind of innovations we wanted to cover, and for the political economy, for the basis of sharing cities, right? And the commons, it's simple, really. It's there's a common pool asset, like something that a group of people share, right? It's a group of users, and then it's a governance system that allow the users to manage that asset over the long term and do it democratically, and in a. That is fair, and where the resource can be shared equitably. And so, and this is an old paradigm. It's an ancient one. It's been studied heavily. Eleanor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize in Economics for her work on the commons. And the upshot of her research is that often the people involved in a commons are better able to manage a resource than the market or the government. They're the users, they're right there, they know what's happening, and so they can often manage a resource for decades and even centuries in some cases. And the interesting thing that's happening now is, and we're going to do a story on this, is her work is being translated into the urban context, which is a different animal. A lot of these natural resource commons like forest, fisheries, grazing lands, and farmlands, they're isolated, they're in rural areas, and there's certain principles about how they work that kind of cut across all of them. And some of those principles apply in the city, and some may not, right? And so there's a group of scholars, Christian Ione, Sheila Foster, who are translating that into the city. And so we're following that. They're in this book, and one of the I think most groundbreaking innovations in our book is what Christian Ione worked at. He's a professor of law at Luis University in Rome, and a commons activist and a lawyer, and he worked on a project with the city of Bologna to create a urban commons regulation and process where the citizens actually take care of things like parks and cultural assets, schools, and through the process and the regulation form collaboration pacts with the city, and they can kind of get support from the city and open other, the city can open other resources for the citizens doing this. And this all started in a really simple way. There was a couple of women in their neighborhood, they wanted to put in park benches in their park, in their piazza, and they weren't able to do it. They would go to City Hall and it just bounced around. There was no space for someone to improve their neighborhood, right, or their city, and so they worked out a way to do this. It's kind of a hole in administrative law, and they've opened a new possibility with this urban commons regulation.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So sharing city. So the book then.
Yeah.
So you kind of given a sense of what the book. Of what this sharing city is. They're all over the world.
Right.
So what's this book? So apparently it's a collaborative effort. So say a little bit about that. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, how we did it, we wanted to walk our talk, and so we built a collaboration process with, brought on some fellows who wanted to work with us and help write the book, and there were fellows from all over the world, and who would take on a piece of the book to do on a certain topic. And so we, through our fellows and also our partner organizations, so we work with a lot of organizations, NGOs and so forth. This is how we put together the content of the book, and we did a collaborative book proposal too, right? Like we came up with the idea of the book.
We mean in Shareable?
Shareable and our community together, right? So we had to decide together, what is this book going to be about, right? And so this is. We got our marching orders from our community, and then we executed with their help to create it. This is our community's book, right? They said, we want this, and we want it to be this way, and we worked together to make that happen. And they wanted the commons to be front and center, and they want it to be an accessible guidebook with a curated best case studies and policies that we, that are best in the sense that they have some track record, there's some effectiveness there, right? That people could take and act on, and read a case study and say, I want to do that in my community, right? And that's a big part of our theory of change, is change not through scale, that's the Silicon Valley way, change through replication, right? The way that the co-working actually market unfolded. There wasn't a big chain that made it grow. It was an idea that a lot of people copied, right? The early co-working people here in San Francisco, they were sort of marketing geniuses, kind of, because they came up with a really good idea. They had a good name for it. They documented. They had videos and documentation. They talked about what they were doing and why they were doing it, and then people just copied it. And that's how co-working grew initially. I mean, now there's WeWork and there's, big money coming in, but it got started that way.
Did it really start here?
Yeah.
Here?
Well, yeah. Yeah.
And just as a little side,
Yeah.
what's the roots of that? That's curious. It was literally...
Yes, on 2nd Street, Citizen Space was one of the first ones. And Tara Hunt, and there's a few other folks involved with her. And it was right there on 2nd Street.
With the idea being, let's get a space.
Yeah, freelancers who wanted to work together, that instead of working at coffee shops or alone at home, you could come together, share a space, help each other, both in terms of cost savings, but also getting work and working on projects together and have some fun. There was that element also.
And then so it kind of what year is this kind of?
Yeah, that's like 2007-ish, something in there. Yeah.
And then it started the hub and all kinds of things, and
yeah.
now it's very common.
Yeah, it's all over the world too. It's a global phenomenon. And I've been in co-working spaces in Germany, Italy, and they're South Korea, Japan.
And people do recognize it as starting here around the time in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So there's another theme there.
Yeah.
Started out with just the freelancers coming together, figuring out, and eventually becomes WeWork and big scaling corporations. Now, do you see that as synergistic or a good thing, that there's commercial versions of that can really scale, or do you see it as co-opting it, or what's your attitude towards the interaction between those two sectors?
I think a lot of it is to be determined in a way. It does make me a little wary, though. Yeah.
Say more what you're talking about there, the nuance there.
Yeah, it's. Read the introduction to this book, and you'll clearly see that we're not ideologues. We want, like the Zapatistas, to create a world that can contain many worlds. We don't want the commons to be the end-all. Complete replacement for everything. We just think it should be of heightened importance, right? So I don't want to dismiss WeWork out of hand, right? What I would like to see is that these smaller community spaces can continue to exist, and that they can thrive and be there for the type of co-working user that values that, right?
And that, given the distinction, give a distinction. That meaning more community-oriented, more. Is it
the social? What we were talking about before is that social component, that chance to connect with others, the transformational potential of that interaction, of helping one another when you have a common aim and you live in the same community and you're trying to help each other and you want to be successful. That's what I mean. Instead of something where you're just sharing space and maybe there isn't a whole lot of interaction, and you like it for the amenities and the cost savings. Like, I like the coffee there, or they have a gym, or the food is good in the cafe, or it's nice furniture. It's more about the people, and like an example of one thing. Thinking about the future and something that's futuristic, it's happening now, but there's this company in the Netherlands called Seats to Meet, and they really...
It's called what? Say it again?
Seats to Meet.
Seats to Meet?
Yeah, so seats, number 2, meet. And they figured out a way, this is amazing, they figured out a way to make good money, not billions, good money, with free co-working, and so what the way
how does it work? I'm just curious.
Right. It's like, wow, how does that work? Basically, they in their flagship, there's 2 things. They have their own physical premises, and then they have an app, right, which is a location-based social network for freelancers, for them to find free places to work and help each other and exchange knowledge, because access to the free spaces is predicated on you have to agree as a user to help other people in the network.
Oh,
right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how do they make money on it, though? You mentioned there's a way to make money.
Well, there's two ways. on their actual real estate, they give away the co-working spaces in the core area, the common areas, and then around it, though, they have a lot of fee-based space of, from phone booths to big meeting, kind of venues, plus food service and media and everything.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so they give away the co-working, and they book everything like almost 100%, because people love them, because they offer what they call nomads, with a K, nomads, a free place to work and also free lunch every day.
A free lunch that's on top of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So they've got this, very enthusiastic community that helped them grow through word of mouth. And then on the app side, they have partners that agree to have set aside space and have Wi-Fi for people to show up and work, right? And the people, those partners pay like a monthly fee to be part of the network, and so that's how they can scale it through. And they're going to other cities and enlisting local partners. So it's an interesting model where it's like it's distributed yet connected, right? They provide a kind of the technological platform, but they have partner operators that are in charge of the local markets and build the local markets out, right? So this is a kind of model that that we're excited about because it's localization and spreading wealth, and also has an aspect which can scale, but slower and carefully, right? And these guys, they don't want to take any venture capital because they're from the hospitality business, right? And they really value the experience. That's what they really focus on, is how do we create great transformative experiences for our users, right? And their corporate slogan is a celebration every day. That's beautiful. I mean, I just love it. They're lovely, lovely people.
Rooted in Amsterdam. So it's a European thing?
Utrecht.
Oh, in Utrecht.
Yeah.
And then, is there versions here or no? That's a European thing.
It's coming on. They're sending someone over and meeting them, and they want to expand slowly and carefully with the right partners, because they want to preserve that experience. That's key. It'll fall apart in their minds without that.
So I like what's happening. So there's this ecosystem, and without schematizing too much, there is the kind of completely non-transactional sharing world that some people are very clear that that's what they want.
Yeah.
And then there's the kind of, let's say, venture-backed kind of more Silicon Valley version of that that scales very rapidly by definition.
Yep.
But does provide value, and it seems like from your point of view it's got a place in the ecosystem. But what you're most excited about is this middle space a little bit. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
But that's that kind of taking tools and insights of how to scale, but also keeping it more localized and a little more focused on the human connection rather than returns or something. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good, and I would say that it's from that sort of level you talked about pure sharing to that point. Like, we're interested in all of that, but that middle ground is exciting because it's kind of new, right? And there's a lot of experimentation and cool things that people are trying. Like, for instance, platform cooperatives. This is the second, sort of like reaction to the sharing economy movement that we helped catalyze. And platform co-ops, one of the ones we're doing a series of feature stories on them to really document how they work. But the founders, they're interesting. They're kind of bridge from Silicon Valley and sort of tech industry, traditional way of doing things, thinking about scale and speed, to the new thing, right? They're a sort of bridge because they did the old way, right? Brianna, one of the founders, they did iStock Photo, and they built it up and they sold it, and they were like, okay, well, we were successful, kind of. We weren't successful in a sort of social way, and I think, they concluded that they probably could have done better by their users, the people that they relied on for their success. And so they started Stocks United, which is a stock photo marketplace online but the photographers are the worker owners. So it's a multi-stakeholder cooperative, right? So Nuno and Brianna, the owners, and some of the management, they're also members, but they're and they're investors too. So they got it started, right? They had the money to catalyze it.
From their iStock photos,
Exactly.
Cash out.
Exactly, right. And but the photographers are member owners. It's 1,000 member owners. They're doing over 10 million a year in revenue. They've already produced surplus, which has been distributed back to the photographers. You know, the photographers again, they're the worker owners, and they have a backlog of 10,000 photographers who want to be part of this, right? So it's this really beautiful balance, right? And they also, you know, aren't like pouring gas on to grow. You know, they want to do it very, they want organic growth, and they want to keep their values and this cooperative structure in place, right? And they're in a position where they're, you know, they can take their time.
And how? So we've actually had some conversations with others on platform cooperatives.
Yeah.
And so do you see that as a growth space for all kinds of different cooperatives? I mean,
yeah, there's one that's getting a lot of attention now. It's called Up and Go, and there's kind of a core of them that I see as really solid. Up and Go is one of them. Stocksy is one of them. Fermando is one of them. We have an explainer on our site about platform co-ops. So you can do a search, just do platform cooperatives and explainer, and it'll come up and it'll give some of the examples. There's there's the platform cooperative consortium now. So this is formed by Nathan Schneider and Trevor Schultz from the.
We actually interviewed Nathan.
Oh, you did,
Schneider,
yeah.
And actually we've had Trevor on a roundtable we did too.
Trevor, yeah.
But anyhow, this is interesting.
Yeah.
So you see this, just to put it in context, because we're connecting the dots here as well for these projects, is so you saw the sharing movement kind of catalyze into this sharing economy thing. You saw that got kind of squeezed down into this one way of thinking. And then you saw two reactions to that. Platform cooperatives being one of the more new ones.
Yeah.
And then the other one, both of which you had a hand in, that one and you're saying
Sharing cities and
the sharing
platform
cities thing. Do you feel that, are there any other reactions? That's one thing, but also do you feel that the actual sharing economy in its more, let's say, corporate version, is that reacting to that reaction? I mean, is the whole ecosystem kind of moving in a more social or kind of humanizing side? Or I'm just curious, what's the action reaction kind of thing going on here?
Where's the state of play now, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I think they do influence each other, and I think these reactions like platform cooperatives and sharing cities, they put in the public mind perhaps more demands, a higher expectation of anyone that is using the sharing economy sort of banner to talk about their business. And at the same time, like Airbnb and Uber have become so big that the influence could be limited as well, right? This is it's TBD. It's to be determined. We can't. We don't operate on the sort of basis of like waiting for the other guy to do something. We have our vision, and we're chasing that. We're supporting that. We're building partners and writing content and doing stories on that. And we'll see where the chips fall. And to an extent, you have to let the chips fall where they may. You want to sort of catalyze, or I want to in Shareable. We try to catalyze the kind of things that we see positive in the world. But you can only do so much.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know some of these, like Uber is very much a lightning rod in Airbnb and in some way in certain circles. So, and you've been kind of just how you've handled this is interesting here. But do you feel that those two movements you described are they kind of hostile? You think to that other way, or do you feel it's just yes and that we want to do something different and let's just let us do our thing, or how would you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sharing cities is more constructive and less contentious. And in the end, we're about solutions. Shareable is about solutions, right? We want to, help catalyze things that matter, things that help people, right? And not, we're not in the business of being a critic, right? Mm-hmm. At the same time, you can't be, you can't be ignorant or unaware of the criticism, right? But it's about a balance, like. Any criticism that we do, we offer an alternative, right? Mm-hmm. We're trying to point people to solutions, and I think the platform co-op has a little more, I would say, ideological orientation and perhaps less flexible. That they really want more purists, maybe that has its strengths, and on the other hand, it could be limiting.
Mm-hmm. Given that it's just interesting to watch you who are just swimming in this space, pointing out these little developments that others might not see. Besides those two things, are there other things that you're watching emerge here or starting to catalyze that are quite interesting? Say more.
Yeah, I mean, I see the whole sharing paradigm kind of merging or becoming part of a larger sort of civic movement, right? Our politics and business are engaging at arm's length with the public. They're using, big data, AI, algorithms to get their message out and organize people and raise money and get resources. And the leaders of major parties and major corporations, they and including Silicon Valley, and sometimes the Silicon Valley companies are especially out of touch with what's going on in the ground, and the reaction to that is that we got to do things face to face. We have to get together with our neighbors to get what we want, right? We can't rely on the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, who their roots in local communities have become weaker and weaker as time has gone on. And they're dealing with big donors and big databases to get things done and move forward, and really sort of become remote and out of touch with the ordinary person, ordinary everyday life of people, and so this is you get both. This opens up the possibilities for a sort of populist reaction, right? And that populist reaction has both positive and negative. So we saw plenty of that in this last election. But there is also, what isn't getting a lot of press, is this sort of positive populism, a sort of civic revival. People getting together and saying, hey, let's use what we have in our city, in our town, in our neighborhood, and make the kind of world we want right here now, right? Let's not wait for a savior, a new politician or app to do it. Let's do it together, right? And a perfect example of this is this UK market town called Frome, and there's a lot of transition town folks there. There's a kind of progressive history there, and some of the townspeople, they got tired of the city council. They were just a do-nothing group who were just bitterly feuding, just doing just this like useless ideological battles, right? And they were like, screw this, and they voted them all out and replaced them with a group called Independence of Frome, right? And
so the city is called Frome. That's the city?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they created a collaborative, council. So they opened up city government and made it action-oriented, solution-oriented, and non-ideological. And kind of asked their fellow citizens, what do you want to do? What do you and how can we help you get that? They didn't say we're going to do it for you. We said we'll help you do it, but you're the driver. And they created a kind of collaborative council similar to the urban commons framework, regulation and process that I described about Bologna, similar thing. And so you can propose to the city council a project, and they can, prove it, help you get some money, or help you raise money. So they have like coordinators that help the projects do crowdfunding, right? So it's, they're just opening up the space for people to contribute, right? And get beyond these ideological battles and like do stuff and be focused on solutions.
So you're seeing the seeds of these things. Is that though a scalable thing? Or are you seeing that in these are little one-offs, or are you starting to see this civic regeneration? It sounds in a broader sense.
I see a broader sense, and those are just two examples. There's many more, and it's because cities have and their citizens have these needs that are not getting met. I mean, cities have higher and higher demands, and less money to do them, and also the challenges. They're wicked problems. They're complicated, and they can't solve them in the old style. They have to open up the innovation process and the change process and leverage an asset that they haven't used much before, which is the people. So that's what's left. It's kind of like, we don't have enough money. We have people though, so let's and a lot of these people more and more, like, they are sort of have this do it ourselves attitude, but they also need some support. You can't do it alone, right?
That's fascinating. Well, we're getting to the point where we don't have a ton of time here, but it's fascinating, all these little developments here. So looking ahead, given that you've been on the forefront of this kind of evolving future of sharing, and in that respect also future of work, which is kind of a similar space we've been doing a lot of work in, what do you see coming in the next 10 years? If you had to do some speculating on where would you say to keep looking? Where would you see kind of interesting friction points or interesting opportunities that you expect a lot more activity in? Yeah,
I'll give you some sort of, I think, I'll share some signals, but I also want to say that question about the future, I think a better question from our perspective at least is, what is it we want, right? What kind of people do we want to become? What kind of relationships do we want to have? What kind of society do we want to live in? And work backwards from that to get what we want, right?
Interesting.
So we really have to rethink that. And then the other thing is, in talking about the future, we've had people who've said things like, make America great again, and people who have said things like, yes, we can. Like, it might happen, like we could do it, yes, we can. And what this book is about and what we're about is more, yes, we are. We're already solving many of the problems that we have. There are already a bunch of solutions available to be replicated and scaled. And we are powerful and we can act, and the time is now. It's not about the past, it's not about the future, it's about you and I here, okay? To really appreciate that, right? I think that's really important. To philosophically and just to enjoy life. Right now, we're in sunny San Francisco and we're having this conversation, and your staff is awesome, and you invited me, and this is a cool thing. So I really appreciate that. I deeply appreciate that. And so so a big preface. But I see more pushback on this idea of a kind of push-button automatic world, and more.
Except in that meaning with AI and robotics and that kind of work. I think.
Yeah, there's this pundit who said something about the smartphone being like a remote control, and you can press a button and get what you want. And on the surface, there's some wonder there. That's kind of interesting and cool. But there's like another side to me, like the real grown-up side, that says, wow, that could be dangerous. Like, who's providing it and under what terms? And maybe that's too easy. What gets left out of the equation, right? And Desmond Tutu said, people are people through other people, right? And if you just have a push-button world, you're not working together with others. That's not building the power of people, basically. And that's what I'm really interested in, because that's where the juice is, the soul is, where people come alive, right? And the way the economy is structured has a big influence on the character and quality of our relationships, and the character and quality of our relationships as the biggest contributing factor to happiness, and also are essential to our development as people. And this is what we should be more focused on. Is, we see in the United States people are having trouble even talking to each other, never mind working together, right? And we should be investing in people so that they can work together, that they become adults and citizens, capable and patient, not expecting things to come at the press of a button. The good things don't come like that. They come from working together.
Well, that idea. Do you you live in here in San Francisco?
Yeah. I live in Mountain View, but where our office is here.
Okay. I mean the Bay Area here. We're talking,
Yeah.
the nuances are not as important. And so you're kind of feeling this bottom-up civic thing, which is also, I definitely feel that, and I see what you're thinking. I've also been here for over 20 years. And but it's also kind of infused with tech and startups and all that world too.
Yeah.
Do you envision a kind of a rebalancing and a reconnection of those in a different way in the next 10 years here that is not at odds, or not at that you could imagine both sides kind of evolving in ways that are more synergistic and co-creative, and as opposed to oppositional and clashing?
I do. I think that we've had a big shift in power from East Coast to West Coast, right? So it's the most expensive place to live here. It's the biggest companies. The most exclusive school now is Stanford, right? And so tech has matured in the number sense tremendously and become these powerhouses, right? And monopolies and duopolies in their markets, but they have, in a way, they haven't evolved civically. They haven't caught up, right? So they're not sort of realizing their potential as contributors to society yet. This has got to catch up, and they have to, and I think they will be, for business reasons, if not personal reasons of the founders and management, they're going to have to adjust. And a simple example here in the Bay Area is if something isn't done about housing, this will kill the innovation potential of the area and drive their labor costs through the roof, right? So they've got to get involved. There are huge incentives for this, and the innovation piece is the piece that's maybe not appreciated that much, and it really is a very personal thing to me, because I experienced it firsthand when I was organizing these salons early in my kind of sharing career. It was super hard to find a place to hold a little meeting, right? There was no space, right? And as the standard of living has got more and more expensive, and commercial real estate and housing has got more expensive, people have to spend all their energy just making rent and all their time, and there's no more literal space or time to spend on extra crazy cool things that you could try out that could become the next thing.
Interesting.
So we need to give people the time and space for new things to emerge. The tech industry really needs to think about it, I think.
Well, I don't know even how you relate, if you do relate to Burning Man, but there is a kind of a Bay Area tradition that is a place that both those worlds that you talked about converge on the playa in the ultimate sharing space where no one can pay for anything except ice.
And coffee. They're not foolish.
Exactly right. But Does that give you hope? I mean, there is a vision out there that people see the value in sharing.
Right.
And once a year, at least, everybody kind of aligns with that vision.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just curious what you think about that.
I think that it can be an influence, and I hope it's more of an influence on the tech community than tech is an influence on that community. And we'll see how that turns out. There's definitely tensions there, but it has a reputation, and for me, has been a place where you can learn new things, learn new important insights, and have those kind of transformative experiences that could set you in a new direction and say, well, you know what I was doing was a mistake, and I'm going to do something different now, right? And there is hope that some folks who go there from the tech community get that experience and say, okay, I'm going to try something else,
Kind of like you did back in Brussels.
Exactly.
How many years ago?
Yeah. 13 years ago now.
Well, I think that's a good place to stop. We have a full hour, a lot of great, fantastic ideas, and it's been so great to have this conversation with you.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Peter. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.